Father J.I.S. sentenced women and children to the greatest shame of the church. And while innocent children bear it, the shame does not belong to them. Neither does it belong to the women caught in its net. The shame is Father's. It is his to bear and his alone.
I'm gonna live a life I sing about in my soul.
In 1922, Elder Walter Wright married his wife. In the bride's family home, Father POI officiated the marriage. Together, the couple had only one son, a talented boy with a golden voice. By 1941, Elder Wright had been the leader of the House of Jacob for 7 years. The church called him Father J.I.S. In August of the same year, he acquired over 162 acres of land in the hills of Coshocton, Ohio. He named it the farm. Father J.I.S. lived on the farm until he desired more privacy. He found it just an hour's drive from Coshocton, a secluded property in Mount Vernon. He called the private estate. The farm was open to all members, but the place was accessible by invitation only, though it did have its own church sanctuary. The need for privacy had to do with what was occurring at the place. Father J.I.S. lived there with his wife as well as his mistress, a beautiful woman in her early 20s. He was 61. Between 1953 and 1968, his mistress bore him 7 children. On several of the children's birth certificates, their father was listed as one, James City, a name invented by father and church officials to deceive authorities into believing his mistress was married and conceiving children with a man other than father. It was a mirage. The young woman never married. She was trapped with no escape. She'd come to the farm with her sisters as a teenager. Father was wealthy, a king in his realm, his word the final authority. Hundreds of followers worshipped him as their Messiah. In her early 20s, with little life experience, education, she was caught in the orbit of a man 40 years her senior. To her, he was all things: her father, her religious leader, her employer, and her captor. Surrounded by his inner circle of loyalists, she had been groomed to see her hidden status as a sacred blessing. But it was a heavy and complicated burden to bear. As an open secret, she could bear his holy seed, but her innocent offspring would never be permitted to carry his name for legitimacy. Masquerading as his cook while sharing his bed, the naive young woman birthed healthy, talented, and bright children. But however morally conflicted her life on the place was, at least here, she enjoyed social status as a church mother, as well as regular access to fresh food, fine shelter, and luxury travel. Had she married a man back home in Paw Paw, West Virginia, assuming her husband could find any work at all, it would be in the lowest rungs of a dangerous coal mine or logging company. While the place came with its compromises, back home she'd likely scrape out an existence as a sharecropper's wife. But her security still came at a cost. Vulnerable and insecure, she lived under constant threat, knowing that her lover was elderly and growing frail. When father died, her and the children's only protection and inherited privileges would vanish. The circumstances of her children's birth would be seen as a moral scandal requiring a cover-up because of its reputational risk to the very church she'd devoted her life to. Her beautiful children, an unwelcome stain on the legacy of the righteous man she believed had saved her and her sisters. Sheltered beneath the same roof was father's wife. She had consented to the arrangement, helped to make his young mistress comfortable with what they both knew in their hearts was wrong. But what choice did either of them really have? The bylaw book that her husband authored excused his sin and theirs so long as she consented. Sometimes at dawn, she'd reach for her husband only to be reminded that he wasn't by her bedside. Their intimacy now replaced by an arrangement she never wanted, but imposed on her nonetheless. Had he not claimed the privilege of a mistress, she would not have chosen this fractured existence for the second half of their marriage. Yet, She knew better than to protest or to put herself first. Too much was at stake: Father's happiness, the church's future, her only son, the innocent children now multiplying under their roof, and everything she and her husband had built together. Father's hidden life, cloaked in privilege and secrecy, compromised not just his own integrity, but the moral fabric of the church itself. The place was not just a fortress of luxury, but a breeding ground for deceit, where moral authority licensed a culture of misogyny. Key officials knew Father's secret, and many male ministers wanted in on the exploitation of young women. This unholy pact between Father and his subordinates created an unspoken agreement, one that ensured mutual protection in exchange for mutual silence. Father's wealth and power allowed him to hide his transgressions behind the tree line of his private estate, but his male ministers lacked such means. For them, he institutionalized their secrecy, constructing a cover-up system that protected those beneath him, just as it protected him. The system was relatively straightforward. Father J.I.S. used his influence over the membership to orchestrate cover-up adoptions for the illegitimate children fathered by lower-ranking male ministers. Most adoptions occurred in-house between teen mothers and loyal church families. Failure to go through with the adoptions could result in a teen being punished to the backseat, shunned by her family and friends, lack of church advancement at the Holy Convocation, or God forbid, excommunication. Her sense of hopelessness balanced only against the promise that her swaddling infant would have a respectable two-parent home with adoring parents who loved Father and the church as much as she did. The teen's exploitation reduced to an exchange of her silence for absolution from a sin her pastor convinced her she had committed alone. By 1970, Father had even dedicated a home for unwed mothers, naming it Lydia-Dinah's Retreat. In his dedication speech, Father stated that the purpose of the home was to serve the daughters of Zion, whom fate has dealt a treacherous blow. Seeming not to take accountability for his own treacherous role in the fate of the daughters of Zion himself, Father went on to declare, "The daughters of God have been greatly neglected and have become a prey to every beast of the field and have fallen victims to the poisonous serpents of the swamps of unrighteousness." Remarkably, Father's eloquent speech disregarded that young house of Jacob women and teen mothers were not only prey to serpine beasts, but also to Father and his ministers. And so, the house of Jacob became not a sanctuary of faith, but a house divided by secrets, a place where truth was sacrificed on the altar of power, and the sins of the fathers were borne in silence by the children and followers who had no part in them. Father knew better than to trap and groom a young lady who had moved to the farm in hopes of a better life and spiritual guidance as an impressionable teenager. We only carry his shame because he transferred it to us in order to further he and his male minister's own lust and misogyny. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is holding on to a story that was never yours to carry, but you've carried it for far too long. It's time to release it, not in this public forum, but in a private, safe space where you can truly be heard. If you're listening to this, I want to encourage you: don't hold your story inside another moment. Write me. Share it with me privately. It can be the first step to separating yourself from the pain and the lies that have weighed you down. Let's begin the process of freeing ourselves and our elders, those who are still with us, who are abused, who are silenced. They deserve to have their stories told, and we can honor them by sharing the truth of what really happened. And let's not forget the mothers who are abused, but are no longer with us. By sharing their stories posthumously, we can give them the dignity they never received in life. The problem is not you, the problem is the problem. By telling your story, by externalizing the issues, the guilt, and the responsibility that never belonged to you, you'll begin to reclaim your truth. We've been made to believe that these lies are part of who we are, but they're not. They never were. Your story matters. Let's begin the journey together. DM to share privately.
I can't go to church, shout all day Sunday, go out a single bird.